She came into the great hall of Velding the way someone who has already decided not to be afraid of it enters a room, not boldly, not performing courage, but quietly, with her hands folded in front of her and her chin level and her dark eyes taking in the torchlight and the assembled lords and the tears of watching wolves with the same unhurried attention she probably gave to the grain of difficult cloth. I did not know her name yet. I knew only that my wolf had gone still. This was not typical. My wolf had been restless for 3 years, not distressed, not frantic, but restless the way a hunting dog is restless when it has a scent it cannot close, something near and real and just beyond the ridge. I had learned to function around it. I had governed Veldane, heard petitions, rode the border lines, signed the trade compacts, and been a reasonable king by most measures, while my wolf paced something invisible in the corner of everything I did. I had spoken to my steward about it. My steward had suggested, with the careful diplomacy of a man who values his post, that perhaps I had simply passed the optimal age for bonding and should make peace with an ungifted match. I had dismissed this. I had also, privately, half believed it. Then she walked into the hall. The bonding rite of Velding was held on the last night of the summer moon, when the torches in the great hall were supplemented by the moonflower lanterns the women of the city wove from late-blooming vines, and the whole chamber smelled of green warmth and old stone and melted beeswax. 12 women stood in the presented circle this year, which was typical. The council screened them. The rite formalities confirmed their standing. I walked the circle as tradition required, and whatever happened in the walking either resolved into a bond or it did not. In 38 years of bonding rites, nothing had resolved. My council had grown impatient. Lord Farron in particular, a compact man with a talent for useful information and a corresponding talent for using it cruelly, had spent the past 2 years maneuvering the presented circle toward his own political aims. He controlled 3 of the 12 slots this year. I knew this. I had chosen not to challenge it because Farron's alliances kept the eastern trade roads open, and I was a pragmatic man who could tolerate a degree of counsel maneuvering in exchange for functioning infrastructure. I had not been aware, until I entered the hall tonight, that one of Farron's 3 slots had been given to a seamstress. My head steward, Heroine, caught my arm just inside the entrance archway. "My lord," he said quietly, "there is a situation at the far end of the circle." "What kind of situation?" "The woman at position 12. Her name is Lyra Ash. She is a seamstress. Guild registered, no wolf blood, no pack name, no sponsor." I looked toward the circle. 12 women in formal summer dress, arranged in the traditional arc before the dais. Position 12 was the furthest from the dais steps, the place where, traditionally, the least sponsored candidates stood, the ones the council considered formalities rather than possibilities. She stood there very quietly in a dress that was clearly her own work, fine stitching, practical cut, nothing decorative about it except the quality of the seam. She was not performing anything. She was simply standing there, looking at the moonflower lanterns with the expression of someone who has come to see a thing through and intends to. "Who placed her?" I said. Heroine was careful. Lord Farron arranged her inclusion as a gesture of openness to the guild community. A pause. Lord Harvin's faction has been pushing for lowborn inclusion in the rite for 2 sessions. Lord Farron outmaneuvered them by including her, with the expectation that the outcome would demonstrate his point. I understood. Farron had placed her there to be walked past, to stand in the circle and be visibly passed over, so that the next time Harvin's faction raised the issue, Farron could say the kingdom had extended the invitation and the bond had not recognized it. She knew this. She had to know this, and she had come anyway. My wolf, in the vicinity of my ribs, went very still. I walked to the dais. I received the formal opening from the rite master, an elderly man named Coral who had conducted 23 rites in my service, and whose voice had the particular tone of someone who has made peace with the ceremonial. I sat. The traditional music began. The lords took their places in the observation tier. I looked once more at position 12. She had turned slightly to look at the great window above the dais, the one my grandmother had commissioned, the old wolf etched in blue glass that caught the moonflower light. She seemed interested in it. She seemed, in fact, more interested in the window than in the circumstance she was standing in. This was not what I had expected from someone in her position. The first movement of the rite began. I descended the dais steps and began the walk. The walk was not complicated in form, only in meaning. I moved slowly along the presented arc, pausing before each woman, meeting her eyes, waiting for whatever the bond would or would not do. In most years it did nothing, a perfectly civil meeting of eyes, a slight sense of warmth or simple humanness, nothing else. I would complete the walk, return to the dais, and the rite would close without resolution, and everyone would go home, and the council would convene in 3 days to discuss the matter with diplomatic frustration. I had done this 11 times. The walk was familiar. Tonight it was not. By the third woman, my wolf was pulling. Not toward her, sideways, along the arc, toward the far end. I put my attention on the woman in front of me, who was the daughter of Lord Harvin's second ally and was wearing her family's traditional silver and being precisely as lovely and correct as her situation required. She smiled at me. My wolf noted her existence without interest and continued to pull sideways. Fourth woman, fifth. My wolf's patience with the process was thinning. There was a moment, around the 6th, when I understood that whatever was happening, it was not going to be found in the first half of the arc. My wolf's attention had settled in one direction with the particular quality of a thing that has finally confirmed its bearing and is waiting for me to catch up. The laughter began around the 10th woman. Not loud, a carefully contained sound from the observation tier, the kind of laughter that is shaped to carry just far enough without being attributable. 2 or 3 of Farron's allies, noting that I was approaching the far end. They were watching position 12, the way men watch a jest they have written in advance. I did not look at them. I reached position 11, a girl from the lower city, placed by Harvin's faction in genuine good faith, who met my eyes with a nervousness so honest it was almost painful. My wolf acknowledged her with something like sympathy. She was not what it was looking for, but she had not come here to be used as a demonstration, and it knew the difference. I stepped past her. Position 12. Lyra Ash. She heard me approach and turned from the window. Her eyes found mine with no particular difficulty, not boldly, not performing anything, simply turning to face what had arrived. Up close she was perhaps 30, with a seamstress's fine focus look, the kind of eyes that notice thread count and light sources and whether something is true or only appears to be true. Her hands were at her sides. She was not gripping the fabric of her dress. She was not bracing. My wolf detonated. That is the only word for it. 3 years of lateral restlessness, of circling something invisible, of a scent that never closed, all of it resolved in one instant into a certainty so absolute that the sensation was not unlike being struck. Not painful, more like the moment when a room's door opens and you understand you have been cold for a long time. The mate mark on my left forearm, dormant since I'd come of bonding age at 20, burned gold. It was not subtle. The warmth ran from my wrist to my elbow and lit up under the cloth of my sleeve, and I was aware that the mark was visible through the fabric, because the fabric was summer-weight linen, and the mark was brighter than I had imagined a mate mark could be. She noticed it. Her eyes dropped to my sleeve for one moment, then came back to my face. She didn't say anything. She didn't smile in triumph. She looked at me with the same quality of attention she'd given the window, interested, present, unhurried. I had no idea what to say. I had prepared no protocol for this. I had assumed, in 38 years of rites, that either the bond would announce itself with the dignified subtlety of a tradition-keeping thing, or it would not announce itself at all. It had not been subtle. My forearm was glowing. From the observation tier, I knew the voice. It was Farron said, in the carrying, well-shaped tone of a man who believes he controls the room. The rite master should remind the woman at position 12 that her time is complete. The circle is concluded. A pause. Then she may step down. Lyra Ashe turned her head in the direction of Lord Farron's voice. The turn was not fast. It was the turn of someone who intends to see what she is looking at before she decides whether it requires a response. She looked at Farron for a moment. Then she turned back to me. I should go, she said quietly. Not to placate Farron, not from shame. Simply because she had not come here to make a scene, and she could see that a scene was building, and she was the kind of woman who, given the option, prefers to remove herself from scenes rather than stand in the middle of them waiting for them to resolve. She was going to step back. She was going to step back and walk out of the circle with the same composed steadiness she'd walked into it, and Farron was going to note the outcome with satisfaction, and the laughter from the tier would get slightly less contained, and the whole machinery of the demonstration would close exactly as he'd planned it. My wolf moved before I did. I am not sure that is precisely accurate. I am the Alpha King. I am not subject to my wolf's unilateral decisions. But the distinction is academic. What happened was that my wolf surged and my body followed, and both of us were off the dais steps and crossing the 2 paces between us before I had formally decided to do it. I reached up. I unclipped the ceremonial cloak from my shoulders, the deep green wool with the gold border, the one the rite master brings out each year, and which has been worn by every Alpha King of Veldin since the hall was built. The symbolic weight of it is not small. I put it around Lyra Ashe's shoulders. The hall went very quiet. I mean that in the specific way in which large stone spaces go quiet when something unexpected happens. The ambient noise of breathing and fabric, and the distant night sounds of the city simply stops registering, because every piece of attention in the room has redirected. She looked down at the cloak, then she looked up at me. "That is yours," she said. "Yes," I said, "and you are wearing it." Her mouth opened slightly, not in triumph, not in performance, but in the way someone's mouth opens when they are recalibrating. She had come here expecting to stand in a circle and be walked past and go home, and not give Farron's counsel the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. She had not prepared for this specific outcome. "You should know," she said carefully, "that I don't have a pack name or wolf blood or a sponsor. The council is going to argue that this is irregular." "The council," I said, "argues about most things. It is how councils are useful." I was aware that I was speaking in a carrying voice, one that reached the tears. I was doing this deliberately. The bond is not irregular. It has an opinion. I have learned in 38 years that it is generally correct. From the observation tier, Farron said, "My lord, the protocols of the rite stipulate." "The protocols of the rite," I said without raising my voice, "stipulate that the Alpha King names his Luna when the bond is recognized. I am naming her." I looked once at Farron. He was a compact man, and he had, at this moment, the look of someone who has discovered that the room he thought he controlled has a door he did not account for. "You will address her as Luna Lyra from this evening forward." Farron closed his mouth. He held my gaze for 3 seconds, then he lowered his eyes. This was the choice: he had to lower his eyes or leave Veldin, and he knew it, and the calculation did not take long. He was a practical man under everything else. He bowed. Lord Harvin, in the tier above him, was doing something I had not expected. He was smiling. A careful, private smile, the smile of a man who has spent 2 years arguing for something and has just watched it arrive by accident from an unexpected direction. He caught my eye and quickly unsmiled, out of decorum. I returned my attention to Lyra. The cloak sat on her shoulders with the particular authority of a thing that knows it belongs somewhere. She was still recalibrating. I could see it in the stillness of her, the quality of a careful person processing a large amount of new information. "I came here," she said quietly, "to stand in a circle and not be frightened of it." "I know," I said. "I didn't come here expecting." She paused, looked at the mark glowing gold through my sleeve. "How long has that been doing that?" "Since position 12. She took a slow breath. Then she looked at the hall, at the watching lords, the rite master with his scroll, the 12 women who had been in the presented circle, and were now occupying the interesting position of witnesses to something unprecedented. The wolves in the lower gallery, who had all, I noticed, turned to face us, and were sitting with the particular focused attention of animals who have recognized something significant. "This is a great deal of people," she said. "It is the rite. There are always a great deal of people. And all of them are looking at me." "Yes." She considered this for a moment. Then, "All right," she said, not particularly to me, to herself or to the room or to the circumstance, an assessment completed. "All right." My wolf in the vicinity of my chest made a sound that was not quite a sound, more a settling, the way a thing that has been taut for a very long time finally allows itself to go slack, not from defeat, from arrival. I offered her my arm. She took it. Her grip was even and unhurried, and she walked with me toward the dais the way she had walked into the hall, without performance, without fear, looking at the room with the same attentive interest she had given the window and the torchlight, and the difficult circumstance of standing alone at position 12, for the amusement of men who did not know her. The rite master, to his credit, recovered quickly. He is a man who has conducted 23 bonding rites. He has flexibility. He called the formal recognition phrase, the one that locks the bond in kingdom record, and my wolf answered it with the only response wolves know how to give, which is complete and unconditional, and has no diplomatic qualifications. The moonflower lanterns, which the women of Velding hang with great care, and which are supposed to glow a soft ivory throughout the ceremony, had gone the warm gold of the mate mark. I did not know they did that. No one in the hall had apparently known they did that, based on the reaction of the assembled company. A wren later told me the greenery in the courtyard had bloomed overnight, a fortnight before its season. I believe him. These things happen sometimes when a bond that has been searching for a long time finally closes. The days after the rite had a quality I found difficult to categorize at first. Not chaos. Velding ran too well for chaos, and the court, after the initial shock of the evening, recalibrated with reasonable efficiency. But a texture I had not felt before, the sense that the space I moved through had rearranged itself slightly while I wasn't watching and now fit differently. Lyra moved into the eastern quarters without ceremony. She brought her work basket, a large, battered leather case containing what appeared to be a small complete sewing operation, and a personal library that was 3 times the size of most council lords' libraries, and which contained, among other things, a complete set of guild law texts that she had annotated. The annotated guild law texts concerned me slightly, until I asked her about them. "You annotated these," I said. "I was on the guild arbitration committee for 4 years, she said. "You have to annotate them or you lose track of which precedent goes where." "You were on an arbitration committee." "I am a seamstress, not an idiot," she said, without heat. She was sorting a new stack of documents and petitions that had come in that morning, which she had apparently requested from a wren, who had apparently provided them without checking with me first. I made a note to speak with a wren. Then I made a note not to, because looking at her with the petition spread on the table before her, cross-referencing something in the guild law text with what appeared to be genuine interest in the problem, I felt my wolf settle in a way that suggested this was exactly correct, and I should not interfere with it. What was on the arbitration committee, I said instead. Disputes between guild masters about apprenticeship terms mostly, sometimes sourcing conflicts. Once a fairly significant case about a master who had been charging apprentices for tools that were supposed to be provided. She found what she was looking for in the guild law text and made a note on the petition. He hadn't been paying his suppliers for 18 months either. The case went 3 sessions. What was the outcome? He paid his apprentices back, paid his suppliers, and was censured from taking new apprentices for 2 years. She looked up. The suppliers forgave 2/3 of the debt in exchange for priority access for the next 5 years. Everyone got something. That is how arbitration works when you do it correctly. I sat down across from her. My wolf was entirely at rest. This was a sensation I was still unaccustomed to. Lord Farron, I said, is going to petition to have the rite reconsidered on procedural grounds. I know, she said. He has 3 allies with legitimate standing. He has 2, she said, making another note. Lord Casson's standing was conditional on the trade compact renewal, which lapses at the end of the season. I checked the dates. She set down her pen. My lord, I understand that I arrived here without warning, and that the council is going to be difficult, and that there are legitimate procedural concerns about how last night was managed. I am not asking for any of that to be simple. What are you asking for? She considered this with the seriousness she seemed to give to most things. Time to understand the work, she said. A Luna has function in a wolf kingdom. I don't have wolf blood. I will need to understand what the function looks like when the person doing it doesn't have wolf blood. No one has done this before, I said. Someone is always first, she said. That is also how arbitration works. The first formal challenge from Farron came 9 days after the rite. He filed a procedural objection with the rite master, citing 4 points of protocol regarding the eligibility requirements for the presented circle. 2 of the points were legitimate. 1 was a stretch. 1 was simply wrong, and I suspected he had included it to give us something easy to concede so the legitimate 2 would look more substantial by contrast. I showed the filing to Lyra over the evening meal. She read it without comment for about 4 minutes. Then, his 3rd point is wrong. Yes. He knows it's wrong. He put it in to make concessions easier. She set down the filing. His 2nd point has some weight. The eligibility requirements do specify pack sponsorship as a traditional element. Traditional, not mandatory. There's a distinction in the rite records from about 80 years back when a woman from a founding family claimed bond right without a second sponsor because her family was the founding lineage. The ruling held. I had not known this. I had competent advisors who had also not known this. Where did you find that? I said. Your library has the rite records going back 400 years. I asked Irene which shelf they were on. She picked up her fork. Your predecessor's predecessor's ruling specifically said that traditional elements of the rite are interpretive, not binding. Farron's 2nd point can't hold against that precedent. You read 400 years of rite records in 9 days. I read quickly, she said, and I had a reason to. My wolf was doing something I could only describe as smug. I gave it the dignity of ignoring this. The challenge was heard 3 weeks after the rite, before the full council, in the hall where the rite itself had occurred. Lyra sat at the dais table to my left, which was the traditional position of the Luna, and which several of the council lords had visibly not expected me to maintain. Farron presented his points. He was, as always, skilled at this, the compact precision of a man who has done this for years, who knows which arguments to lean on and which to hold in reserve. When he finished, I nodded to my steward. Irene read the precedent. The one from 80 years back. Farron went very still. He looked at the documents in his hands. He looked at the council lords on either side of him, who were also consulting their own notes, and coming to the conclusion that this precedent was real and had not been in their preparation materials. Then he looked at Lyra. She met his eyes with the same quality of attention she had given him in the hall at the rite, interested, present, without malice, without triumph. She was simply looking at the room and seeing it clearly. Farron said, with the particular dignity of a man managing a public recalibration, "I was not aware of the 80-year precedent." "I imagine not," I said. "The records are in the Eastern Library. They are clearly labeled." A long pause. "I withdraw the second point," Farron said. His first and third point fell without the second to anchor them. The filing was dismissed. Oren recorded the dismissal with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has been a steward for 20 years and has learned to take his satisfactions where they come. After the council session, Harvin caught my arm in the corridor outside. "She found the precedent," he said. "It was not a question." "She did." He was quiet for a moment. Farron arranged her placement in the rite to demonstrate that the bond wouldn't recognize someone without pack standing. A pause. "The bond recognized her anyway." "Yes." And then she spent 9 days reading 400 years of rite records to defend the recognition. "She was on an arbitration committee for 4 years," I said. "She annotates her law texts." Harvin looked down the corridor toward the dais room, where Lyra was speaking with Oren about something that appeared to involve a petition and a floor plan. He had the look of a man revising several assessments simultaneously. "She's going to be formidable," he said. Yes, I agreed, she is. I had understood this for some time, since, in fact, position 12. There was a night about 2 months after the rite when I came to the eastern quarters late. I had been in a border consultation that ran past the second bell, the kind of session that requires the particular kind of attention that empties a person, and found Lyra at the work table with a lamp and the guild law texts, and a new petition that appeared to be about a dispute between 2 fishing villages and their respective claims to a shared estuary. She looked up when I came in. "Estuary boundary case," she said. "The villages have been disputing it for 30 years. 3 previous arbitrations, none of which held. I think the problem is that every previous ruling tried to divide the estuary. That didn't work. Estuaries don't divide cleanly. The fish don't respect the line." She turned the petition so I could see the map she'd sketched. "The better solution is a joint authority. Both villages administer the estuary together, with arbitration only when they can't agree. It removes the boundary question entirely." I sat down across from her. My wolf was, as had become its custom in this room, entirely at rest. "You are going to redraw 30 years of estuary policy," I said. "I am going to suggest it," she said. "You are going to decide it." "I am going to agree with your suggestion." She looked at me with the particular expression she had when she thought I was being imprecise. "You don't know that yet. I haven't finished the argument." "Finish the argument." She did. It took approximately 20 minutes and involved 2 precedents and a detailed accounting of the fish migration patterns she had apparently researched from the guild's commercial records. By the end, I had confirmed my initial assessment, which was that I was going to agree with her suggestion. "You should have been an arbitrator," I said. "I was an arbitrator," she said. "For 4 years I was good at it." "You could be Veldon's chief arbitrator." She set down her pen. She looked at me with something I had come to recognize, the look of a person turning an idea slowly in her hands to see all its angles. "Is that a title with function," she said, "or a title for dignity's sake?" "Function," I said. "The position exists. It has been vacant for 6 years, because no one I trusted had the patience for it." "The estuary case alone would take 3 sessions," she said. "Minimum." "Yes." A pause. "All right," she said, "not particularly to me. to the room or to the idea or to the expanding catalog of work that seemed to organize itself in her vicinity. All right. My wolf made its settling sound again. I had stopped being surprised by the things she said yes to. Or rather, I had stopped being surprised by the manner in which she said yes. Always that same assessment, that same weighing of angles, and then the quiet decision to go forward. She had come to the rite knowing what they intended for her, and she had gone forward. She had read 400 years of records to defend a bond she had not expected, and she had gone forward. She agreed to an empty title that had been waiting 6 years for the right person, and she went forward. Senzapora. Without fear. Not because she had never been frightened. She was, I learned later, a woman who was honest about fear, who named it when it was present and went forward anyway. Not bravado. Something older and quieter than bravado. The quality of a person who has decided that what is on the other side of the thing is worth the facing of it. My wolf had known this at position 12. It had recognized the kind of courage that does not announce itself, that stands in circles without sponsors, that looks at large halls full of watching lords with the same attention it gives windows. I had been slower than my wolf. I was catching up. The estuary case resolved, as Lyra had predicted, in 3 sessions. The joint authority was established. Both fishing villages contested it initially and then, finding that the joint administration removed the need for any boundary at all, stopped contesting it, and got on with fishing. The guild's commercial records showed a measurable increase in estuary productivity within the year. Farron attended the resolution session. He sat in the back of the arbitration room and watched Lyra conduct the final session with the 2 village representatives and the guild's fishing committee, and afterward he came to find me in the corridor. "I'd like to meet with her," he said. I kept my expression neutral, regarding. "I have a sourcing dispute that has been unresolved for 4 years," he said. "It involves 3 parties and 2 kingdoms, and a warehouse that may or may not have been deliberately misdirected." He paused. "She found the estuary solution in 3 sessions. The dispute has been sitting in 3 separate arbitration dockets without resolution. You are asking the woman you placed in the rite to be humiliated, to arbitrate your 4-year commercial dispute." Farron met my eyes. He was not a man who apologized easily. He was too practiced a courtier for easy apology, which is a different thing from being unable to apologize. "I am asking," he said, "to meet with Chief Arbitrator Lyra, if she is willing." I brought this to Lyra that evening. She read the dispatch Farron had sent outlining the dispute. She read it twice. 4 years, she said. "Yes." 3 dockets. "Yes." She set the dispatch down. She looked at it for a moment with the expression of someone assessing a complicated seam. "Tell him yes," she said. "Tell him to bring the original documentation from all 3 dockets and the warehouse transfer records, and the contracts." She picked up her pen. "If there's a solution, it'll be in the contracts. You're going to take his case." "It's a legitimate dispute," she said. "The fact that the man who brought it here chose poorly at the rite is his own concern. The dispute is the dispute." This was, I thought, one of the more efficient forms of justice I had encountered. Not vindictive, not forgiving, simply matter of fact. The case was the case. The man was the man. They were not required to be the same thing. Farron's dispute resolved in 2 sessions. The solution was, as Lyra had suspected, in the contracts, a clause about warehouse jurisdiction that had been drafted ambiguously in the original agreement, and that 3 previous arbitrators had attempted to interpret rather than replace. She suggested replacing it. The 3 parties agreed. The warehouse was recovered. The misdirection was attributed to contract ambiguity rather than bad faith, and the commercial relationship was repaired. Farron came to me afterward. "She found it in 2 sessions," he said. "Yes." A long pause. I placed her in the circle to demonstrate that the bond would not recognize someone without pack standing, he said. I was wrong about several things. Yes, I said, you were. He looked at the floor for a moment. Then, she has my full counsel support, going forward. It was not an apology. It was something more useful than an apology. A change of position, stated plainly, by a man who had the standing to change positions and the pragmatism to know when he should. I'll tell her, I said. She will appreciate it less than you think. He looked up. She doesn't need your support, I said. She was going to do the work regardless, but it will make the work easier, so she will be glad of it in that sense. Farron considered this. No, he said after a moment, I don't suppose she does need it. A pause. She's going to remake the arbitration system. I think she has already started, I said. He left. I stood in the corridor for a moment before going back to the eastern quarters, where I could hear, faintly, the sound of Lyra explaining something to a wren about a petition that appeared to involve a mill and a water right, and a 15-year-old misunderstanding about which family owned the relevant tributary. My wolf was at rest. Had been at rest since position 12, since the moment she turned from the window and looked at me with the same attentive interest she gave everything, not frightened, not performing, simply present to the room and to whatever the room brought. I had been king for 38 years. I had governed well, I thought, by most measures. I had kept the trade roads open and the border agreements current and the council manageable and the wolves fed and the eastern claims settled. I had done these things alone, in the specific way that a person who does not know they are missing something does things alone, not poorly, not unhappily, just with a particular quality of incompleteness that you only recognize in retrospect, when the incomplete thing has been completed. The moonflower lanterns were still up. The women of the city left them for a full turning of the moon after any successful rite. They had been going gold all season, warming and cooling with something I had started to think of as contentment, the way a fire banks and brightens with the draft. I went back to the eastern quarters. She was explaining the mill case to a wren with a sketch she had made of the tributary in question. A wren had the look of a man who has been a steward for 20 years and is discovering that the job is larger than he thought, which was an expression he had been wearing frequently since the rite, and which I suspected he was beginning to enjoy. She looked up when I came in. The mill case, she said. The tributary was reassigned in a land grant 60 years ago, but the assignment wasn't recorded in the water right register, because the registrar at the time had a different view of what constituted a tributary versus a runoff channel. I'll need to pull the original survey. I'll have it located, a wren said, making a note with the enthusiasm of a man who has found a problem he knows how to solve. Thank you, she said. Then to me, how was Farron? He withdrew his opposition, I said. He said you have his full council support going forward. She received this the way she received most information, turning it in her hands, assessing it. Good, she said. That will make the estuary follow-up easier. She looked back at the sketch, and probably the mill case. There's a land grant involved, which means council records. That was all. Not triumph, not performance, not the relief of someone who has been told they were right. Simply the practical acknowledgement that a resource had become available and she intended to use it. She was going to remake the arbitration system. She was going to find the 80-year precedents and the ambiguous clauses and the misrecorded water rights, and she was going to fix them, case by case, with the same attentive care she had brought to position 12, standing there without performance, without fear, with the full quality of her attention on whatever the room brought. My wolf had known. At position 12, before I had spoken a word to her, before she had said a single thing, My wolf had looked at this woman standing alone in the far end of a circle with no sponsor and no pack name, and no reason to be anything other than frightened, and had made its assessment. The assessment was, this one without question. This one has been the answer all along. I sat down across from her and looked at the mill sketch and listened to her explain the tributary situation to a wren with the specific clarity of someone who has already found the solution and is now describing the path to it. The moonflower lanterns outside in the courtyard had gone gold again. I thought, going to spend the rest of my life in this particular kind of company. This woman and her annotated law texts and her 4-year arbitration experience and her work basket and her gift for finding the thing that had been misrecorded 60 years ago, and the thing that had been resolved ambiguously for 30 years, and the thing that everyone else had tried to interpret instead of replace. I was not sorry for 38 years of rites. I was glad of them. They had meant that when she finally stood at position 12, without fear, without performance, simply present to the room and to whatever the room would bring, I was the version of myself who recognized immediately what that quality was and what it was worth. I put my hand over hers on the table. She turned her hand under mine so her palm met my palm, without looking up from the sketch. "Mill case," she said. "Then the estuary follow-up. Then I want to look at the eastern border water rights because I think the misrecording problem isn't isolated." "All right," I said. She squeezed my hand once, briefly, the way someone who is in the middle of work and has made a private note of something returns their attention to the work. Outside, the moonflower lanterns glowed. My wolf, which had been restless for 3 years, was finally and completely at rest. It had always been her. It had just been waiting for the room to deliver her, and for me to have the sense to recognize what she was when it did.